Happy Valentine's Day. Okay, folks, so I've got the Sweet 16 kind of tuned up with the ugly piece of copper roofing with a tiny little springy point pointing on a galvanized retainer plate hanging by wires. This is a pretty precarious little wiring situation. However, I will put parts from this thing with silver oxide contacts and springs and tune this relay rate up so I can vary the speed of this. But for now, I've got the field adjusted so that that's the relay field, which is just what Ed had on the wall. And he had the small bottle in series with it. And here he had the PMH connected. And it turns, I think. I don't know if it turns or not. Looks like it's picking up. It gets going. It's supposed to. If I gave it a spin, it would. You know, it was whipping before. So either there's a resonance that's changed, I bumped something. Anyway, it's turning. So as it's turning, if there was a cam right here with my finger, oh yeah, and there's my hand. How big this thing is, it's not that big. It's about 12 inches in diameter. Anyway, if I were to take, say, this Sawzall, okay, let me find something else. It's going to get moving now. And I had this like laid up against there, you'd see it'd be like that'd be the cycle of the hammers in the field. The cycle of the hammers in the field would be too fast right now. Depending on the size of the machine he might be using in the field. The smaller the unit, the quicker the resonance. If he was using a small chipping hammer, the speed like that would be like tink 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 tink. You can see those cam lobes are going pretty quickly. So here's the stick. Now I'd get some work done, but it'd be too fast for a large well chipping yoke. So I think he had a way to slow this machine down. And of course my relay has achieved a maximum resonance due to everything involved, which in this case includes the design of the relay, the spring tension, the dangling configuration, the weight of the wires in the coil, even the resonance of that little kind of springulated bracketry that you see holding it up. That was a lighting case, that white looking thing. What's funny is it even says something on the back that I kept, so you can even see the spark in there pretty good too. But it says double pole, bipolar. I think it might even be UL, but I hope not. B2T1. I suppose someone can look that up for the fun of it, but I'm babbling because my mission is to record this indefinitely. and it's been 4 minutes so far. And I want that to be known because I want people to realize that Ed's machine was nothing more than a DC motor designed exactly like this originally. Well, I shouldn't use exactly, but damn close. Those two coils are on the wall at the castle. They have string where my little wires are, and my wires, as I will point them out, are just safety wire holding this plate. It has holes. Then, as you can obviously see, two 3/8 bolts with some regular 3/8 copper wire, gas line made into spools. I cut the ends like flares, flared them out like little flowers, bolted them through. This is primitive, folks. Real primitive. I think Ed's relay had a little better tension control and all kinds of things, because he needed better reliability. He was actually cutting and working. So, I'm not saying this wouldn't keep going. If I knew that my little or whatever, and it doesn't mean to say that he couldn't have put another PMH across here and had, or even not a PMH, another set of relay actuating contacts like this to pilot a very high vibrating hammer with his 24 pole machine. But personally, my opinion, seeing this little 16 pole machine, knowing that pulse per revolution creates RPM, and the pole equation in any generator or motor pretty much deduces that he probably had a 24 pole machine to get more torque and slow it down so he could actually do larger work instead of high frequency hammers. He wanted a slower machine. At least that's a theory. That's something I can't absolutely prove, but I suppose cutting a lot of coral I'd learn that. Maybe. You could also put just 2 or 3 cams up here instead of 4. You could have one switch it and keep it fast and it'd still have the same rate, like a 2-stroke versus 4-stroke firing. And while I'm here on the back side, I thought I would illuminate my non-U-shaped PMH. Now, that's also got copper spools wrapped with tape. And then I've got the regular magnet wire, and I've got enough coils such that obviously, even with tape and smelly products, this thing is merely warm right now. And also, I have to clarify something for people. The thing that you saw, my maiden voyage, which I may just attach to the forward of this long video, had accidentally only one coil connected, and it got really warm quickly and the other one stayed cool. So that was pulling with just one pole. Now I've got them actually connected in series, which doubles the resistance so that I get much less current flow. If I were to connect those in parallel, this thing would probably be flying around. Of course, what happens is this is really strong. It sucks this right into it. So it's all about that base, No flexum. And I got flexum because I don't have an angle bracket holding this little, what's called DIN rail. For anybody out there listening and paying attention, DIN rail is the stuff that the industry in America uses to, well, not America, I believe it's the world. I don't know what it means, drop in something. And the DIN rail basically is a chunk of angulated metal for some strength, but it's not that strong. So if I really crank that PMH up with some good power, it'll suck right into those magnets. And I don't want that. So it's just a nice gentle pulse, and my goodness, I'm running this thing off. I'm actually running this off of this one battery. This battery is separate merely to pilot the field of the magnet, because when we were at Roy's we found that the pulse off the PMH was such that it disrupted the field to the sensing relay. Because of the drop, that would oscillate with a bad resonance. So this is kind of my plan on separate batteries. Make sure that, I'm sure I could tune it all up with caps and such, but for me, I thought I'd explain that. And then, like I said before, this rheostat is in series with those coils, which are also in series together, or they get too hot. So I actually found the sweet spot pretty good, pretty lucky. Well, educated guess, of course, but anyway, what I'm getting at is the rheostat makes it so I can hone in with those values and get it to work without heating up too much, because I want it indefinite, which, to define indefinitely, does not mean perpetual motion, does not mean forever. Indefinitely in this context means the darn thing will run as long as it possibly can without any physical limitations, such as wires heating up, bearings breaking, and wires not chafing. It means that if you had your empirical, scientific, ideal conditions honed right up, the darn thing would just continue to run. No overheating. So now that I've clarified that, I gotta find some more subject matter, because the thing just accidentally is running indefinitely now, which is good. And it shows people that that little fire alarm battery right there on the sawhorse is running that PMH, and that's what's kept it going for the past 11 and a half minutes. So on that note, for efficiency, this rheostat, as I've said, on the right hand side, the battery, the rheostat, and the coils are part of a single piloting circuit. This rheostat is the simulated little bottle that you see in the famous drawing. He would have had a small bottle to tune the field to the relay, and then the large bottle with the larger wire on it with better heat dissipating characteristics may have been used to tune the PMH right down to getting that thing to pulse just right. And that's how he controlled the speed. Because this thing moves right along, and right now I would like to back it off because I smell something. I don't know what it is. My guess is this, that the magnet wire's okay, but I've got regular stuff up against this little section under there, and I'll tell you what, that little arcing gets that plate real hot. It gets to the point where I can't even touch it, so I think it's melting some gobbledygook. But for your viewing pleasure, I still have 2 bars on my new cheap batteries for this camera. I'm just going to continue to let it film. And so, what I'd like to do is set the camera down and let my arm rest. Because even though this is a light little camera, my arm is almost numb. And for anybody that cares, I have a hub from a 2000 Chevy Silverado supporting that on a brake drum that I machined with a grinder while it was turning. And I ate a lot of crap that day. But for the concept of this all, I had to do it because the rotor was too big and the magnets would have been blended like the original's flywheel, which I almost did that to show that Ed's original would have had this lower ring almost out to the bottom magnet. And that's why the original had 6 tiers. because it would have given him enough torque to yank those heavy Model T parts around, the crankshaft, the flywheel, and something that a good friend across the water pointed out to me, which I knew that and others may not, and so I'll repeat that, is that Ed had the Model T engine on the vertical. That's not a thrust bearing. Those bearings are meant to suspend through a hydraulic pump while it's rotating horizontally. So I'm guessing that Ed probably ought to put a few drops of oil on his crank every here and there. And that's why the bottom of that crankshaft, or the bottom of the engine, is open to atmosphere, so he can easily put a little drop of oil on each journal every day. Because otherwise, I know that Roy's is quite taut. The tension on that is rugged, so you need quite a bit of magnetic flux to yank that around. This one obviously is a little more efficient because it's on a wheel bearing. And I'm using a silly little fire alarm battery that's already 2 or 3 years old. Two and a half years old. Or no. Anyway, not even 2 years old. Well, that's good. And that's why it goes. So what I do with those is I put them back on the charger, like those other two right now are charging. They have to be charged in series because that's a 24-volt system. Indefinitely, he said. I'm at 16 minutes now and a half. And it's still going. So I guess on more comment, this is the configuration like that on the door. If you folks have witnessed the other wheel that I have in my garage, which is the 24-pole ugly, this PMH here is way over here next to this. And when you do that, you would see that there's two here and two here. And those consume a whole quadrant on a 16-pole machine. And therefore, the wishing pool has that configuration laid out. The other drawing is on the north wall as well as on the door. And that's basically this configuration from the top view. You've got two poles here that are being consumed, and the line of commutation is drawn down through, and then you've got two poles here. Yes, I know it's the moon and the earth. That possibly pertains to something else as well, but Ed can kind of notice the congruency between the two and didn't have too much else to worry about. Put that together, and over 28 years figured that he could draw it on the door, because he noticed that it was a similar syzygy. Now for those that just heard that, that's a big one. Syzygy, S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y, has no vowels, so to speak, other than the Y's. Cool word, like the mythical business. Yeah. A syzygy is a opposing or conjunctive alignment of heavenly bodies, such as an eclipse, lunar or solar, or if another planet aligns with the Earth and the Sun, that would be a quadruple or quintuple syzygy. So those planetary alignments that were discovered by Ed back when, or by him about others, were possibly just cool conceptual notions on the same concept as kind of what you're witnessing right here. If you look at the machine, by looking at it straight on. The sun's in the middle, if you will, the moon on the other side, and the earth here, or whatever. I do it the other way. And I say, imagine this is the moon over here, the center is the earth, and that's the sun. Then you get some idea of how this whole thing might work. But that's only hocus pocus as far as it goes now. Who knows that the free energy key isn't in that secret right there as well, due to the matrix being aligned congruently and you have large and small wheels within wheels. Why wouldn't the magnetic flux that comes from the sun be only available at one point of the day or the other point of the day, 2 times of the day, not like it is? Everybody thinks it's just magical, pull it out of the air. I don't think that's it. I really don't. I think if it's possible, it's done during a certain time. The same reason that a magnetic pulse on a motor or a generator will not induce when the field is perpendicular or straight on. It has to be at right angles with the relative motion going past. So there's food for thought for anyone that knows about the Polaris telescope and the alignment of Coral Castle and the potential layout of the grid and the potential frequency of the Tesla-Schumann resonance and the possibility that this machine didn't just cut rocks because the obviousness of the cams is right in front of you, but he may have tried to siphon energy out to charge those batteries as well. Like all the internet jargon says. But here's what I say unto you, folks. If that's the case, why is there a big DC generator down there right on site? So, if anyone can prove how to charge DC batteries out of the air with a giant grid at a certain time of the day with an oscillatory Okay, folks, so the camera batteries died, not the machine. I did not leave it running this time, but I just started it back up after about 3 minutes. And then I felt these little coils. They're getting fairly warm, but they're not getting so hot that they'll blow up or anything. So just for the hell of it, now that you guys have seen the 20 minutes or so of indefinite coverage, to know that this thing's quite reliable, and that's actually what you just saw, that 20 minutes was its 3rd voyage. A friend stopped by and he and I played around just for a minute here and socialized, and I tuned it up just to show him, and this is what I ended up with, so I'm not going to mess with it for now. But of course, eventually I will make that relay so darn reliable, and maybe I can have help from somebody who cares out there, you kids at institutions wanting to play with this a little bit for maybe a class project. I wouldn't say this is something that would replace a 555 timer and a piloting relay that would clunk something like that. So modern technology certainly has its application. However, so does old ancient stuff that is so reliable it's disgusting if you had a specific artisan's purpose. Or you just didn't have a lot of money and you had access to resources and you fabricated your own piece of machinery such as this and said, I don't care what anybody else thinks. Like Ed. Who cares? This is a pretty efficient little goober, actually. So anyway, the batteries died after 20 minutes. And what I was going to say is, I was going to kind of feel bad, but I don't, because I came back up after 3 minutes, and those two little relay coils right there, believe it or not, don't have very much wire on them, as you can see. And they're wrapped around a 3/8 copper pipe that has a 3/8 bolt inserted through it. So there's quite a bit of tape and copper and consumption there. Speaking of consumption, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, the volume on that cylinder that's consumed is not really all wire. So what I'm getting at is that 24 gauge, or 22, I think that's 24. I'm not sure. Anyway, I didn't even ring it out. I just tested it. Empirical data, but you'd want to do your Ohm's law, get a meter, ring it out, figure out just how much is going to that coil, then you'd impart a certain resistance so it didn't get too hot, and then hope your magnetic work that you need to have it do is accomplished, and then you get your indefinite operation. Same thing with this, pretty much. All balances with the resonant properties of its electrical and mechanical values, which in this case have a lot to do with wire size and iron core sizing, therefore the reluctance of the machine, or the material magnetically to operate the machine. Trying to formulate my articulate wording. I'm not doing very well. But it's quite specific, so I try to speak with the proper terminology, because reluctance has to do with iron. I don't know if anybody knows that. It has to do with the largeness of that. See, what's funny, and here's why I say this here is what I had originally. Now, here's what's kind of funny. I had these little spools right here, wrapped around here. And I had both of them. And when I energized them, they had the same amount of wire that's on here now. The ones that are on there now had the same amount of wire. So the same resistance, same voltage. However, it didn't have the same inductive reactance. And it didn't have the same efficiency to create the magnetic field, because the coils of wire were basically just dissipating the electrons back to their source, whereas the magnetic flux of the larger iron core helped to guide them into a more efficient means of actually performing the work where it needed to be. Instead, I was heating up the air with it like that, and this little core was doing some work, but now I'm doing a lot more work and heating the air much less. And so let's see, I'm at 5-6 minutes into this second capture, which is really the continuing one of the first one, which I wish the batteries wouldn't have gone dead, so you could see like a 50-minute indefinite operation. Which I'll just keep it going now. I don't care if this video is an hour and a half long. I don't want people telling me that this thing didn't turn continuously. I know I'm a pain in the glottis when it comes to proof and don't give me that kind of thing. Because I do believe firmly in scientific empirical knowledge that's been given to us in an array of hexagonal lattice, apparently, in such a manner as not to deviate from a certain created matrix, so to speak. That will be agreed upon by all people, because we are just wired to and tuned with our five senses to see the manifested material that is presented before us in an array that many people have discovered. Mendeleev was the first one that figured out the periodic table comprised of its wrap, which in the spiral, And then it went on to isotopes within that array, and it just continues on and on and on. And then you get into electricity and static electrons and potential and forces and Newton and the whole works, and after a while it gets to be kind of the same thing. And I believe that this scientific empirical data that's presented to us is calculatable, however you say it. It's easier to say it that way, but it's calculable. And empirical and fixed without some outside deviant force, as we all know. Now, here's the magic. Within that calculable matrix, there are some variants that seem to be incalculable and therefore non-seen with instruments unknown to mankind at this time. The best instrument we have is our being, our consciousness. Being conscious with consciousness is very controversial, because what gives us anything to perceive? Why wouldn't all that tie together? Why wouldn't we be able to somehow have free will on top of that rigid matter? And we do, I believe. I think that rigid matter is only rigid to a degree, and certain conjuring, I guess, maybe not conjuring, I don't like that word, but sources of oscillation can culminate and manifest as a resultant. Like, say you somehow think you might be able to blow the door shut with the wind. Who's to say that that's impossible, because to everyone else the wind blew the door shut. To you, of course the wind blew the door shut. But it blew it when you wanted it to. Or did it just shut when you were told that it would? A proposition. Matrix or variant free will? You decide. In the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I'm losing it. Imagine Ed working with those rocks. He'd be working on the coal mines, going downtown, working on the coal mines. And in the morning, what time of day? What time in the morning could you gather that free energy? Yep. Told you I was losing it. So I got to put a hand crank on the top, because when this thing fails, when that relay burns out, at least Ed had his manual backup. And believe me, ex-naval service, I can tell you that it would be stupid not to have a manual backup. You want to be able to crank that wheel by hand or with a bicycle or even a reciprocation engine. I see all kinds of methods he used to turn the wheel. Honestly, folks, Ed's mission was not to turn that wheel electrically. That was just a nice feature that came with it and probably worked really good, but when it didn't, he could still quarry and cut, not quarry, but sculpt his rocks. He could set his machines up and go inside and have himself some consumption relief by pedaling on his bicycle and get rid of that tuberculosis. No, I don't know about the tuberculosis. I don't know, that could have been misdiagnosed. It could have been just the zeal and the vigor that you get from discovering something new like this. Or just, if you listen to Nikola Tesla's autobiography, he was a nutball. I love that guy. He was basically talking about how he had cholera and they were all convinced of himself dying, including himself, until his father sent him to engineering school, and wham, I'm out of bed, Dad, I feel great. Now tell me there isn't something involved in the panaceic, psychoactive, intrinsic healing process that's highly controversial as well. Not going there, but I'm just trying to say that Ed probably had other methods. Now this business of the pineal gland and the frequency, the wheel turning at the speed it's turning is about the Schumann resonance, probably somewhere around that speed, about 7, I don't know, maybe it's a little slow. I'd have to count these spokes as it went by. An RPM meter would give me a certain RPM, then I could calculate that out to be probably 4 hertz. Like how far does one of those spokes, how many spokes go by in 1 second is the point. And that supposedly, now the Schumann resonance I believe is the speed of light divided by the Earth's circumference at the ionosphere, creating a frequency that the Earth rings electrically like a bell. It's basically a fish tank circuit. So, on that note, here's another thing that people didn't throw up on the internet that I did or will. If I'm not mistaken, it's probably out there and I just didn't find it, but our biorhythms, I believe, oscillate within some frequencies of that particular resonance, and I haven't even gotten into it because personally I don't want to start believing in all this crap. I believe personally that my brain can cut through every part of that and get to the source of everything there ever was, and that any of this will only be an alien's attempt to screw up what I already got and will always have. So that's my closure on that. But for those that do believe that they got to get up next to the magnetic resultifier and hold their arm up against it, those numbers would align. And I'm not going to be so verbose as to say that that isn't a plausible, theoretical, workable, medical, provable method for those whose belief made them well. Because who really knows? Really. All I know is that I got 3 big green bars. I'm already 16 minutes into this. My arm is tired. And this sucker looks like it's going to keep turning indefinitely. So, guess what? I really am going to set this thing down. And I'm going to abandon people. And you'll probably be, finally, he shuts up. So I'll set it on the television set and hope that it doesn't fall over. No, it's not going to work either. Yep. Yikes a million. Set it on this fan. No. Yikes. Yeah. Okay. Yep. When in doubt, keep trying. Ta-da! I don't know about that. I slammed the door, that thing's going over. Well, it's still in decent capture. So, without further ado, I just went out back for a breather. Test my tuberculosis. And in the back, out where I keep all my old music garbage, I also keep old calendars once and again. And I'll be darned if I didn't just come across this here book of calendars, of cars on a calendar. Green Mountain Electric Supply. Oh man, that's bad. 51st. 51st. That's messed up. Yeah, that's messed up, alright. 51st. So here, folks, I'm going to reveal something that's really weird. For all you hocus pocus focus. It's no jokus, I guess. My name's Scott Russell. That damn Scott Russell mechanism Ed used. My father started a place right where I'm standing called Stonegate Studios. He can carve people and deer and anything, really. And ironically, out back where we live here in the woods, out of all the people that would end up seeing Coral Castle or discovering how it operates, I have a Model T buried in my backyard. And I'm going to put it up online here soon because there's 1.5 feet of snow out there, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to dig up some of it so you guys can see. And then come springtime with my little tight backhoe, I'm going to go out and I'm going to literally dig it up. And I'm going to find out what exactly it is, because it has fenders that look just like this car, kind of. And it has the same rumble back window piece that's back there. There's an old milk can, but there's a couple fenders. Of course, I don't know, honestly, but my father told me a story about some distant relatives who were going to go out back and cut wood with this Model T. He was going to rig it up with the old Vupa saw so that he could cut wood and have that thing just saw like Ed did, believe it or not. So that kind of freaked me out this morning. My own dad telling me that story, and he doesn't know anything about this stuff yet. Because he's getting over some operation in Florida, and I'm hoping that Coral Castle will become something that we can all go visit in the future and converse about, and I can hopefully really logistically explain to people who want to know bargaining truth about this place for real, not all this stuff that I really don't even begin to believe happened there. I gotta be honest with you guys, this free energy is gonna be rugged. Just personally, I don't know if it's literally logistically possible with all the scientific knowledge we have. I just don't think it is. And it's not because I don't have faith, it's because science kind of says that it's not. And science says that even if it is, that it needs to be done with the utmost care because it's very dangerous. And that we really should stick to simple old hauling windmills because that's the larger, higher powers way of harmonically resulting everything back to that electric energy down to a physical, simple way of handling it so we don't all get zapped or mess up all the airborne waves any worse than they are now. But that's not my judgment whether we get to stir the soup or not. But as for gathering energy out of the air, like I was talking about before the camera died and said low battery, I don't know if that's a sign, but it means I better get my wires out into the air. Anyway, the wires that come out of the air are going to have to suck down a resonance of 7.83 hertz. Now, that would be pretty low frequency. It's almost the speed that you're listening to right now, where that little I can't do it quite that fast. That's probably 3 to 4 hertz. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. So I guess I can guesstimate. I got an inverse clock over here. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm hearing about 5 or 6 pulses. So that thing would actually have to turn a little faster to get any, which I don't know. And then what would you siphon? Cosmic energy, electromagnetic radiation? Not really, because electromagnetic radiation is filtered by the sun by the magnetosphere and the ionosphere, therefore becoming literally almost static. So I'm not sure if one could put wires up that would cut the lines of flux at a certain time of the day. Because if it were high noon or midnight, you might just be surprised how dead it is. So I don't know if anybody knows anything about generator theory, but basically generator theory involves 3 things: a magnetic field, a conductor, and what they call relative motion between the two. Now the key to this theory is relative motion between the two. There's also another thing, the relative motion has to be perpendicular to the field. And so let me see if I can remember this. This is going a long way back, but there's a left-handed rule for generators. I don't even know if you can see my hand, but say you have magnetic field. And this is the magnetic field. This is the wire, and the relative motion between the two will generate electricity in that direction in the wire if it's moving this way. And that means that the right-hand rule works if it's a motor, because if you apply the voltage, it'll move the wire in the same direction. So the relative motion between the two means that the magnet in the end of this little thing has to cut the lines of flux in a wire like this. Not like this. There'll be no induction. Assume this is the sun. If you had an antenna that were laid out in a polarized Polaris telescope configuration, and you had your aerial grid set up, if it were angled straight at the wire, it would not induce voltage. If the earth passed 1/4 cycle like in a generator, it would be cutting the lines of flux in parallel as it traveled and resonated across the surface of the earth. Otherwise, there'll be no energy gained. And this might be hocus pocus, but the word over unity says over you 90. I don't know if that means a fiddler's dam. Probably more like nit 90, like nitwit. But I guess what I'm trying to say to anybody that wants to go put up a giant aerial grid in their backyard, tune a machine to 7.3 and some caps to filter that in and out and siphon like an inductor would siphon water with pressure, you may gain electricity with something you're already using. I don't think you're going to gain more than you put in. I don't know. I just don't know. But if you do, it would be in that method for those who want to try over unity and free energy out of the air. The key is that it's not static. It's actually a pulsing magnetic wave that oscillates around the earth due to the sun's electric and magnetic speed of light concept, with everything being the speed of light, and that the earth rings like a bell at that frequency, and that the only way you're going to tap into anything that's not like the regular radio transmitters or even Tesla zapping whatever's going on elsewhere, which oscillates at different frequencies, the only way you're going to do that is to calculate out the resultant harmonics of multiple frequencies due to the inductive and capacitive reactance of the aerial that you're putting out in your dooryard. It's literally going to have to be like long strands of wire calculated out and tied to a capacitive device to help lead and lag all that pulsing, resonating, tank circuit, gathering, inducting field to bring it to wherever the end up is, which is hopefully through a rectifier down into those car batteries. I hope everybody followed all that. Because unless you got some other way of doing it, that's the only way I see. Even maybe using a pickup off of this generator while he cut rocks. Wouldn't that be the universal device? But I gotta say, To me, what you're witnessing is a simple old electromechanical continuous device that pilots hammers, and there's a whole bunch of batteries out there, and his buddy Mosier came by and he charged the thing back up. The Army Corps of Engineers knows there was a myriad of hit and miss recip engines out there in the field of the quarries that he quarried with, and why wouldn't he use one to charge all those DC batteries back up? And I hate to say it, guys, until somebody proves to me that they've gathered energy out of the air on the internet with a Joule thief or a resonant circuit of that fashion, which is kind of where I got this idea, unless you believe in the conspiracy theory and those who get close to it get taken away, I just don't buy it. I just don't think there's enough energy to charge a car battery with the static that we get. I just don't. But please prove me wrong. Until then, I think the advent of solar power panels and wind turbines and common sense, good old-fashioned home-built stuff is a pretty good way to keep our kids off the street, to allow people to very simply put them in their backyard and gain their own power and charge car batteries, mind you. But I am not into this high energy static zapping stuff. That just, I'm an electrician. I've been nailed. I don't like getting nailed. It doesn't help me visualize any higher power. It doesn't put lead in my pencil. It doesn't make me feel good at all. As a matter of fact, I don't like electric fences. I don't like getting out of a car and getting nailed every time I do something around here, because the static in the air is just incredible. Not to mention that whoever designs this machine to gather it will be playing with high capacitance, a good way of getting killed. And I don't want kids playing with that. I'd rather have kids play with something so simple that they can build it in high school and learn social skills while they're going through the endocrine phase. I guess the big bottom line farmer's term is it'll give them something to do and keep them off the streets. And they're doing something good. They're actually producing energy that we know about. That we can kind of say, yeah, the last 200 years Edison wasn't an idiot, neither was Tesla. And none of them really showed us how to get it out of the air, probably because it really isn't there. And all this internet stuff is a bunch of poop. People dreaming about stuff they really don't know about. And then after that, if everybody had free energy like that, then what would we do? Not saying it'd be wrong. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. I think someone making a bunch of simple coils of wire and making a little rotary old-fashioned windmill that produces power isn't a horrible thing. If eventually that becomes really so barbaric that a man can gather static energy and cut rocks underneath because some nuclear war that occurred and we all have to run for the covers under the rocks, and that provides energy that we don't have any other ways, then I guess so be it, and call me a fool. But something tells me that my missus and I are not going to be slinging tons of copper wire in my backyard right yet. Just 'cause I don't know. Someone's going to have to really throw me a bone that says, hey, you know this has been done, and that if you do this on an acre, you can run your house. And I got to have some more convincing, compelling information than a bunch of people with absolutely no proof whatsoever that will back up all the scientific knowledge that I do know. Because I know that the concept of the Eli the Iceman, voltage and current leading and lagging with power factor and frequency can throw anybody off thinking that they stick a voltmeter or an ammeter up and they're gaining energy. You better just show me that it comes out of nowhere. Then I'll believe it. And for now, this gizmo is running pretty good off this one battery right here. That's basically running that wheel. And as if you look, here's the red wire going to the contact rack, which is nothing more. Oh wait, no, it goes to that little copper plate that bounces, and then the plate bounces on that copper plate. And here's the other wire that's mobile, springs and things. Eventually those will chafe and wear out, and I probably ought to move that one because that's up against the paint. And over the time, it makes a huge difference, believe it or not. I've noticed it. Vibrating machinery wears things out and such. Well, anyway, that's just a turning. Well, that's the whole pilot circuit for that PMH. This here is just this battery through this rheostat, through these coils, which are very, very high resistance. And so these coils don't draw anything out of that. They're just sensing the magnetic spokes, or the iron. They're magnetically sensing the spokes of the iron. Thus, a magnetic reed switch. Well, it's not a reed switch. This is a 2-pole PMH, in a way. Well, Sweet 16's maiden voyage is going and going. I'm not going to interrupt the camera, but I am going to stop talking for a while because the camera is almost out. Those batteries are not Duracells. They're cheap batteries. And very quickly this thing's going to shut itself off again. And from what I see, which I can't read it very well, it says 30, oh my word, it says 39 minutes. Hey, well, guess what, guys? I'm going to upload this video, and tied on with the other one, it'll be an hour video. And for those who want to watch it, it's probably extremely significant video in the very fundamental first grade education on what Coral Castle has to offer about the wheel, Sweet 16, the PMH, the relay on the wall, the bottles, the clamshell clover leaf cams. And I'll put this old bugger back together, you guys, and I'll show you. And I'll cut my own rocks, and I'm going to cut my own firewood with this machine. I'm getting older. I'm going to have the Sweet 16 cutting it out back. That would be sweet. Well, for me, over and out. I'll leave the camera until it dies. Hi. I didn't even know you were here. Guess what I'm doing? This thing's been running for 40 minutes. Come on. You gotta hurry. Because it may not keep going, but I'm sure it will. The camera's about to die. Walk very carefully. That's funny. did that?
You used it at the mobile.
Mine? Accidentally?
Must be.
Oh, that was stupid in here. Take it. I don't want to use this again. I don't want any money in there.
Just keep it on you. Going back to work.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
Huh. Are you shushing me in your party?
Mm-hmm. This session's been like 40 minutes on top of 20 that had bad batteries. With batteries go about 40 minutes apparently. This one's about to drop out, but I'm doing it because to see it run that long is what proves its reliability from days of old. Still going. That was my spouse shoveling the driveway. Well, I'm not sure. I can rewind and check, but it looks like it's slowing down a little bit. And the camera's still going, so you guys can still hear me then. Might as well. So, as it's doing that, I'm seeing that merely resisting the PMH with a small amount of nichrome wire like Ed had wrapped around the... He may not have used nichrome wire. He just might have used iron wire. Because it was common back then, and iron wire actually has a terrible conductivity compared to copper. And it imparts enough resistance to cut it down. And I'm hoping you guys can see it go, because the batteries look like they're getting weak. Or at least the main one driving it, because that thing is slowing down. Because that battery's been running it for quite some time. Well, as you see, an hour and 5 minutes so far. Actually more. As I was playing with it last night. It doesn't look like it's slowing down too much. I'll leave it going. So for those who are made it this far into the video, and the thing hasn't given me low battery alarm yet, but I got one tiny little yellow bar and I don't know how long it's going to last. But anybody now can see that I can probably make the one at Coral Castle turn the same way. And now that I've learned that you don't have to blast the magnets with massive fields of electricity or magnetism, you can gently nudge that thing around properly with the right relay. It's all about the switching. It's all about the timing and the pulse and not killing the magnets. Because those magnets are so weak, I don't think it matters anyway. I don't think it matters that they even react to the field that would be commutating. It is possible that when they're new, the PMH that's not set pole to pole might be staggered, and that Ed had a three-way relay that would alternately fire each corner as it went around, but I think that would be a slopping mess. Personally, I don't think that's what Ed did. I think that the PMH that he puts in his magnetic current is merely a training aid to show how the ring bell twice, the hysteresis collapse and the hysteresis build and collapse of the field causes the light to light twice. Anyway, that was it. Happy Valentine's Day.